Hello to you, hello to you. I am Battle ASMR, or Whittle ASMR if you will, and I've been looking forward to doing this video. I hope you're doing well, hope everything's going great with you and with you guys. Today I'm going to do a ramble about my interest video, and I'm going to be talking about various films and series, TV series, TV shows related to the multiverse. I hope you will find my rambling relaxing and enjoyable. I'm going to use a soft-spoken voice today, by the way. You know, I'm looking so forward to doing this. There has been I've been doing a lot of requested videos lately, and there has been requests that I just ramble and over-explain about something I'm interested in, and I am interested in the multiverse, both as a concept but also in relation to films and TV shows, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to be talking about movies and series that has to do with time travel and multiverse. Time travel and multiverse, that's the keywords today. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today, and we're going to be talking about it mostly in that TV shows and film relation. So, as I'm sure many of you guys are aware, the multiverse has in fiction become quite a popular concept. It's been around for ages, but in the recent decade, within the last 10 years or so, the multiverse has just really expanded its reach across fiction and depictions in fictions. It's become a super popular concept within the realms of fiction, even more so than it was before. So in terms of fiction, if the 2000s were more of a fantasy-themed decade with Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, and the 2010s were more of a dystopic-themed decade with things like The Hunger Games, Divergent and The Maze Runner, then the 2020s may be a more multiverse-based decade. So we're going to get into the gist of all of this today, and I'm going to start by going all the way back to the 1980s, to the films which laid the foundation for many later films and TV shows about time travel. This film trilogy were admittedly not about the multiverse, but it was about time travel. So it is related to what we're going to be talking about today. And it also did actually feature an alternate reality in addition. Way back in the 1980s, in the earlier days of films, there was a super famous trilogy called Back to the Future, which set the foundation for a lot of later time travel stuff within films and TV shows. Back to the Future followed the teenager Marty McFly and his this professor, a crazy professor he knew, called Doc Ock, who worked with experiments in relation to time travel. And eventually, of course, Doc Ock succeeded, and because of this, Marty was sent back to the past. Marty lived in 1985, but he was sent back to 1955 due to the time machine. And got the opportunity to change aspects of the past, was also changing the future. Essentially, and also, of course, while also Marty had simultaneously tried to get back to the future. I'm not going to spoil the details here, but when Marty returned to 1985, his actions in relation to his parents, who were young in 1955, had actually changed the future for the better. So Martin returned to a somewhat different 1985. Then in the second movie, he traveled with Doc Ock to the future 2015, but some twists and complications happened, so that when Martin and Doc Ock returned to 1985, they returned to a completely alternate and different 1985. A rather terrifying version of 1985, where Martin's neighborhood had become a slum, overrun by a criminal and ruthless gang, who was actually led and controlled by his father's former bully, Biff. who had become wealthy and powerful in this future and was now a ruthless guy and owner of the city. Martin and Doc Ock managed to find their way out of 1985 and traveled back to 1955 to find out why 1985 had changed so radically. Then in the third movie, Martin is actually sent back to 1885, to the time of the Wild West, but by the end of the movie he returns to 1985 and actually manages to create a new 1985 and changing the timeline once again by sort of changing a decision he made in the past 1985. I know it's super confusing, but this was a movie that dealt with time travels, and it also featured a few different versions of 1985, so it set the fundament for a lot of later time travel stuff, and although the movies were not about the multiverse in any way, it did nonetheless feature alternate versions of 1985. In the movie it was said that when you change the past, you change the present and future as well. So I rambled and nerded about this now, but that was just to prove that this trilogy was super important for setting the fundamentals of later time travel stuff, and in many ways it also inspired later stuff related to the alternate realities, and in some ways even the multiverse. Okay, we're going to move on to the next piece of multiverse. I'm going to talk about some of you who are into superhero stuff and have seen Marvel may recognize this movie, Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness. I'm not going to be tapping a lot today. If you don't guys like that, just going to tap on it. So one of the most famous movies about the multiverse released within recent years is this one. And Marvel is currently in a sort of cosmic and multiverse saga set to culminate with the release of Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars in 2026 and 2027 respectively. So the Multiverse Saga is the successor to the previous Infinity Saga. And the Multiverse Saga, of course, revolves around, as you guessed, the multiverse. The concept that there are realities and worlds beside the own. Now, the multiverse is, of course, the concept within science, which some people actually also within science believe is real. Not everyone, but some. What there are a number of parallel realities in the world existing alongside our own. There is, according to some, there is a world and a reality for every choice we make, for every outcome. While some believe that the multiverse is even crazier and that there exist realities and worlds that are completely parallel and different from our own, worlds where everything is upside down or where the rules of nature and physics are different than our own. There are different interpretations and ways to see how the multiverse works. But to many people the multiverse is more a fiction concept and more a concept used in fiction. And it's often considered that the multiverse is a basis in fiction for very inspiring stories because the multiverse offers endless possibilities. In Marvel talk, the multiverse wasn't really a big focus in the Infinity Saga. Its heroes were mostly, during the Infinity Saga, ignorant that there even existed a multiverse, but there was a movie almost 10 years ago that started to build up to the existence of the multiverse. The first Doctor Strange movie is where the multiverse is first mentioned within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Here, Doctor Strange, who is actually a very accomplished doctor, who definitely does not believe in magic in the multiverse, loses his hands, and in desperation he seeks out the wise, the ancient one, and her sort of cult of magic users. And she reveals to Doctor Strange that magic is real and that the multiverse is real. And her words to Doctor Strange are, in this film, who are you, Doctor Strange? in this vast multiverse. She introduces Doctor Strange to a realm of possibility that he hadn't even imagined earlier in his life. Doctor Strange was very arrogant and he did not believe in things like magic or the multiverse. But he soon learned to see that there existed much more than he thought. And that everything he thought he knew was just a small piece of a much bigger picture. And in this film, of course, the multiverse is for the first time within the Marvel Cinematic Universe mentioned. And it's here sort of the fundamentals and hints to a later multiverse saga comes. In Avengers Endgame, to undo Thanos' actions in Avengers Infinity Wars, the heroes travel back in time to try and correct things. And they time travel. And here, again, the multiverse, while not exactly confirmed, is hinted at a little. Because later Steve Rogers, Captain America, have to travel back and place all the Infinity Stones in the times they belonged, so as to avoid opening nasty alternate timelines. Of course, the thing that truly opened the doors to the multiverse within the Marvel Cinematic Universe is the TV series Loki. And that's what we're going to talk about now. Loki is, of course, the trickster god of mischief. And he is very central to the multiverse saga, or at least has been so far, and is slated to appear in Avengers Doomsday 2. This is So Loki is a TV series about the Marvel multiverse and timelines and time travel and everything. In Loki, so when the Avengers, the heroes, traveled back in time during the events of Avengers Endgame, they also created a new variant of Loki, because not everything went as planned, and this alternate version of Loki from 2012 seized on the opportunity, and he sort of, he got his hands on, I don't know what the name of that was, but he got his hands on one of the Infinity Stones. He wasn't supposed to, it was never supposed to happen, but due to some complications that happened during the time travel, he got his hand on it, and he managed to teleport him away from the whole New York to somewhere else. However, rather than getting to do as he wants, he is instead immediately apprehended in the opening of the Loki series by the TVA, the Time Variance Authority, where it turns out rules time and space. They rule the entire timeline, and they do not accept the existence of alternate realities. Everything has to go as it's supposed to. And this is what the TVA calls for the sacred timeline. And when variants and things that aren't supposed to happens, they go in and prune and branch those realities to ensure that everything goes as it's supposed to. And this Loki was a variant who had done something he wasn't supposed to, so they arrested him. Loki then gets involved with the TVA and learns about this oppressive time organization who is actually like a time tyranny. They do not accept that anything goes different than that which is planned within what they call the sacred timeline. Loki soon joins up with another female variant of him called Sylvie, and both of them find out who is behind this oppressive time regime, and they do find the man behind the curtain, but they're offered with a dilemma. Free the timeline and open the timeline to endless chaos, a multiversal war, and incursions, which is the collision between realities, or take control and continue to oppress the timeline. Ultimately, the timeline is freed through the actions of both in Season 1 and Season 2. There are lots of details and complications we go along, but I'm not going to spoil that. And this causes the emergence of multiple timelines and realities within the Marvel multiverse to now exist simultaneously with the sacred timeline. Of course, the problem with this is that it causes now chaos across the multiverse, and this leads to the events of the upcoming Avengers Doomsday, where the characters are speculated to they will have to face an incursion. And an incursion happens when two realities collide with each other, which then ends up destroying both realities. And there are now much speculation among fans that in Avengers Doomsday, the heroes will face an incursion event, even of the sacred timeline. As now that the Marvel multiverse has been freed, the Marvel multiverse may be heading for collapse and multiversal war. And the upcoming big bad and major villain Doctor Doom is slated to play a central part in it. And his motivation is speculated to be trying to save the Marvel multiverse from its undoing by taking control of the timelines and the timeline, maybe even merging everything into a single timeline. So things are soon coming to a new massive epic culmination in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or the multiverse, if you will, in this instance. Another movie is, of course, in terms of the multiverse saga, is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. It is the sequel to Doctor Strange, the first movie, and it sees Doctor Strange face off with the Scarlet Witch and ally with people and travel various realms of the multiverse as he seeks to save the multiverse traveling girl, America Chavez. So this movie also features Multiverse of Madness, of course. It features Multiverse of Madness. It features several realities, as Doctor Strange has to travel across the multiverse. And it also features a few horror elements. Not very massive horror elements, although there are some quite brutal deaths in the middle of the movie, to be honest. This movie also touches on the more supernatural element of things, and I'm not going to get too much into that, but within recent years, Marvel has increasingly been laying the foundations for a sinister and supernatural threat within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but increasingly now being built up. Shows like WandaVision, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Moon Knight, and Agatha all along have all sort of been building up to what may come a more supernatural threat, a darker, sinister, more supernatural threat within the MCU after the Multiverse saga. Because they are now building up to both a mutant area and a supernatural area. That's at least the rumors. And of course, in the recent series Ironheart, one of the major Marvel villains, Mephisto, which is essentially the Marvel Devil, was introduced. So this could indicate that a dark and supernatural horror theme threat is on its way into the MCU after the Multiverse saga. Anyway, and of course, Agatha all along in particular started to hint even more to these supernatural beings. Anyway, but that's a story for another time. Another multiverse show is, of course, What If, because we're going to keep our focus to the cosmic and multiverse scope today. I may talk about the more supernatural themes of the MCU in a later video. What If is an animated series which explores various alternate timelines of the Marvel Universe and points which branches off from the sacred timeline. It explores how things would have gone down if various moments and stuff within the movies and TV shows had gone down differently than it did. The upcoming Marvel Zombies, for example, is based on one of the What If episodes and features a timeline where the Marvel heroes face a zombie apocalypse, which is quite terrifying, of course. But there are also other types of various realities like What If Ultron won, What if Agent Carter had become Captain Carter instead of Steve Rogers becoming Captain America, stuff like that. This show is narrated by The Watcher, a being who is quite powerful and is able to see and watch all the various timelines. But it's also an animated series, just to be clear about that. Anyway, we are going to move on from the Marvel now, because it's not just Marvel what's touched on the multiverse, it has been touched on in a lot of other stuff too. There are shows which I haven't watched, but which I've heard about. Horror shows like Stranger Things, but also shows like Dark Matter have touched upon the multiverse. I believe there is an animated series called Rick and Morty, which also touched on it. There are a lot of various series which touch on the multiverse, and films, of course. I'm going to mention two other shows today which I've watched. One is a series which is not particularly known and renowned, but a series which take a more personal take on it is a series on Disney Plus called Parallels, consisting of 6 episodes. It is sort of a French series. I would perhaps advise watching this in French with English subtitles, unless you don't mind dubbing, because the original language of this series is actually French. Although if you can endure dubbing, then it's possible to watch it in English too, of course. Anyway, it follows 4 teenage friends on the Swiss-French border in the Alps, who is actually just, we're just going to spend time in a bunker for a birthday party, and they don't really expect anything extraordinary to happen, but it does, because simultaneously there is an experiment nearby, and we send the various friends into parallel timelines, making them live parallel lives. I'm not going to get into the details of it, but everything is essentially about the friends trying to find back together, and about sort of trying to fix the whole mess which has been created by the experiment, which has sent the various friends living across like 3 or 4 different timelines, essentially. And everything comes to a head, and eventually they manage to find how to sort of get back to their own timeline. So it's kind of, but it's more a personal series, which touches more on the whole personal relation and friendship between these friends, and how this timeline stuff impacts the people around them. So it doesn't explore the gist or the depth of the multiverse. It just focuses on the multiverse's impact on their lives more. But now I'm going to mention another series which actually does go much more into depth about the multiverse, and which is about the multiverse. I've been rambling a lot now, but I'm going to assume that if you're listening to me, you love and enjoy Ramble videos. So I know I've been rambling a lot, but Anyway, Historic Materials is a series which literally is about the multiverse. It is based on Historic Materials trilogy, book series from like decades ago, and the TV show consists of 3 seasons and 23 episodes across these 3 seasons. It follows a girl called Lyra who lives in a reality which exists parallel to our own, a reality which is more like a 19th century type of reality in terms of technology. There are airships, there are cars and stuff, but it has a more 19th century type of style. So in this reality, Lyra lives, and in this reality, everyone has demons, and the demons, which are pronounced D-A-E-M-O-N-S, are essentially animal souls, and it's indicated in the show what every person, every reality has animal souls, but in Lyra's world, they can see those animal souls. And when people come of age, their animal soul will take a permanent animal form, because up until they become adults, the animals can shift into any form they want to. But when they come of age, the animal will settle into a form. It can be an eagle, a cat, anything. Lyra, of course, Lyra's animal soul and constant companion, name is Pan, but all other people in this reality also has animal souls. This reality is ruled by the oppressive and autocratic magisterium, who is against any knowledge that isn't approved by them. They are sort of villains, a villain organization, but they're more secondary in the first season. They become much more primary villains in the second season than in the first season. In the first season, they're portrayed as a little more complicated. There is a prophecy about Lyra, which Lyra is not aware of, and that is that she will bring the end of suffering, and that she will bring the coming of free will, and that she will defeat that. And that she is essentially the hope about the world, that will bring and heal not just her world, but the entire multiverse. So I'm not going to go too much into the details of everything, because there is a lot. But yeah, Lyra has an uncle she admires a lot at the beginning of the series called Lord Asriel, who is an enemy of the Magisterium and who is very interested in the existence of parallel worlds and the multiverse. She is also soon brought into contact with Mrs. Coulter, a rather ruthless woman who works for the Magisterium. At the beginning of the show, there is also a threat in the form of the Gobblers, an organization who for unknown purposes abducts children. And they are kind of the main antagonists of the first 6 episodes of the series. However, there are a few various and different antagonists through the show, and I'm not going to spoil that for anyone who haven't watched it, but eventually, towards the end of the first season, Will Parry, who is destined per prophecy to walk along Lyra, is introduced, but he lives in our world, in our reality, in Oxford, in our reality, and he's not aware of the multiverse or anything, but he eventually, during the course of the first season and at the beginning of the second season, becomes involved with the multiverse and meets Lyra in this reality, which called Sitagasa, at a place called Sitagasa, in an alternate reality, which is sort of like a bridge between the various worlds. And they meet the threats and forces there too. Lyra and Will allies and takes the rest of the journey together. There are lots of other characters and stuff here, of course. And while the first season is set primarily within Lyra's reality, in the second season the focus shifts more to our version of Earth and this sort of world existing in the middle of the other worlds, this Sitagasa world. And although Lyra's reality features in the second season too, but it's has a more secondary role. In the third season, it focuses on the entire multiverse, and there are several worlds. And they also actually go to the underworld and the world of the dead, and this show has a quite creepy portrayal of the underworld and afterlife, to be honest. I should warn people, but although it is a super enjoyable show about the multiverse, which really goes into the gist of dark matter stuff and the multiverse and what makes the multiverse tick. It really does. There are some controversies surrounding the show and the books, because this show does not have the most flattering portrayal of organized religion, to be honest. And often the religious organizations within the series is portrayed more as villains than as heroes. There are some of them who are a little, not exactly good, but a little more understandable than others, but so that's one of the more controversial aspects of it. And it has a very original take, to put it mildly, on the whole Adam and Eve story and the snake in paradise. Because Will and Lyra travel various worlds, and they also go to, not only the underworld, but also to Eden's Garden eventually, during the series final. So it also features a rather oppressive god, who is really not a good god in any way. Although it should be pointed out, I'm going to spoil a little now, so if anyone don't want to be spoiled, just skip this part. It is revealed in the next to last episode that this god is not the actual god. It's a false god. It's a mortal man who became an angel, who then took God's throne and pretended to be a god. So they do go up against a god, but they go up against a false god, a god who stands for suffering and everything what isn't good. The series and books remain vague on whether there is an actual creator or God or not. It is hinted there might be in some way. But this evil God is not the creator God. He is just a pretender. And he and his forces are sort of one of the main antagonists of the third season. But it's a super enjoyable show about the multiverse, and it really goes into the gist about what makes the multiverse ticks. So even if you're bothered by the whole religious controversy surrounding the series, if you like the multiverse and like parallel realities, it is nonetheless still one of the best shows about the multiverse and parallel realities. There is no doubt about that. So now I've babbled and rambled more enough, but I hope you enjoyed listening to Ramble, and I hope I've talked a little about my fascination with the multiverse today. Just to be clear, I have many religious and spiritual values, but I at the same time find the concept of the multiverse super fascinating. I've always been interested in it and intrigued by it. Hope you enjoyed my ramble, and all the best to you. Wish you a great week. All the best.